This podcast is a conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro and is a production of VI Alliance, copyright 2019. And this chart-busting hit, Alone Leave Me, courtesy of New Threads, is available everywhere. Hi, this is Julie and Susan, and we are back with another Neville Goddard read, Feeling is the Secret. And this one's a cool one because it's very short, it's very intense, and you can find it online anywhere, so it's very accessible as well. And I think it has just a great energy to it. It's funny because it's only probably 20 pages if you print it out in small print.
You go so deep, and I go into it, and I go so deep that it becomes very simple to me. And I don't mean simple like dumb. It's so in-depth that the simplicity of it is so beautiful.
That's wonderful because, I can't even get past the foreword. I just have such an appreciation for this work because we all feel. Feelings are everywhere and, people, quote-unquote, make us feel, although, we're the ones who make us feel. Yet anyway, I don't want to go into that yet. I love the foreword because he says, I have purposely omitted all arguments and testimonials and simply challenged the open-minded reader to practice the law of consciousness as revealed in this book. And I really like that because it aligns a lot with what we did in our first book, Energetic Invocations, where we just offered the process. It's what we worked with. It's how we did the work. We do the work. We move along. And there was no kind of crap in there about, just arguments and testimonials. And when we did then the second version, the process this, we put in just some little anecdotes, but there's still no story.
Where I go with this, I go right to, you get out of it what you put into it, which is the truth with anything. If you read this and sounds good, yada, yada, yada. Oh, wait a minute, is my coffee ready? If you don't put the effort into it, you're going to get nothing out of it. And something that relates to life. Anything you do, you get out of it what you put into it. And that's where I read this. I agree with you. I just go into really, a lot of the stuff that's in here, I look back on things I've read, I've heard, even biblical passages, and it's like, wow, it really goes to a very simple way of being.
Right.
And this is saying the same thing. If you're not going to put any effort into it, you're not going to get anything out of it. And that's what I think the downfall of the self-help thing is that I'm going to tell you, this is the answer. Give me the answer. Give me the answer. The answer is you got to do the work to work with your mind.
Right.
And if you don't do that work, I don't care, and I will step out on a limb and say this, that if you do not do the work, you are simply giving your money away in terms of books. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's the truth of it. I agree with you completely. So when he goes into chapter 1, it's law and its operation. And he, talks about conscious and subconscious. And he talks about consciousness being the one and only reality, not figuratively, but actually. And I find a lot of what he talks about to be alchemy, because you really do use your mind and your thoughts with energy to create what you want. And even though we know Neville Goddard has said in the past that all creation has occurred, there's still kind of an end point that you're reaching to. So you're using your ideas mixed with your feeling to create. And I think that's really beautiful because, like you did say, it is very simple.
Well, he uses also consciousness and subconscious. And further on, I don't know if it's in this chapter or further on in the book, that he says basically it's all one. It's just for us, we have to perceive it as two, but it really is one consciousness. And the subconscious really is like a subset of it, but yet it's still the same thing, but they break it out for us to understand it better. And it's interesting because, once again, as he talks about that the consciousness makes the decision, imprints on the subconscious, and the subconscious makes it occur,
right?
And then it appears out there as we say it. And what's interesting is that when you look, and we said this in our blue book, is that when you look outside, and if you don't like something, and people get mad and they always want to point the finger and blame someone. And we have so many discussions and conversations and other podcasts about this one subject, that the minute you point the finger, and I'm going to go specifically to our Oprah versus Donald, everyone's pointing the finger at Trump. And whether you like him or not is irrelevant. And the reason that it's important, I think, to mention it in this discussion is that the minute you say he's the problem, you gave all the power away. And as you read this, you understand, no, we are the problem. Each individual is the problem. And hence, what we said in the Blue Book, the good news is that if you're the problem, then guess what? You are the solution.
Right.
And this, it means that you have to do a little bit of work, a lot of work, however you want to feel about it. Here we go, feel. But this is really the answer to everything. And isn't it? Here's really the answer. And in our book, what we talked about is how to clear all the garbage so you can finally start to see things for what they are.
Right.
And here is the answer. And yet everybody wants someone else to fix out there, to fix them. Can you fix me? Can you make me happy? It doesn't matter. Only you can make you happy.
Exactly.
I think it's beautiful, and it's so simple. It really is so simple.
Right.
And it's funny because and this is a little personal, as I sit and think about life and we talk about the to-do. Well, isn't this really encapsulating everything to do? And it's your own mind. So everybody can do it. This isn't like you have to be, rich, you have to be anything. Everybody does this.
And so the interesting part, too, that I found is that a lot of times, there's all those quote-unquote, we like to say spells out there, like, oh, it's really hard to meditate. Oh, it's really hard to work with my mind. Oh, it's really hard to stop my thoughts. Oh, how do you do that? And he actually talks about, all of what you just said, yet he goes to the other end and kind of says, because we know that the subconscious or unconscious kind of goes ahead and makes it happen. And so what he says is the way to control the subconscious is through your ideas and feelings. So if you can't get to how to control my conscious, it's funny, you can kind of mirror it a little bit and go, okay, I can't access that because, everybody says, oh, it's hard, it's difficult, it's easy, I don't know how to do it, what are the processes? Well, sometimes when you think differently, you get to another vibration. And what if you think about, well, okay, so my subconscious is going to make it happen. So how do I, quote unquote, control my subconscious? Well, it's a little bit of like hypnotizing yourself, because do you see what I'm saying? I'm kind of saying, so you turn around and instead you say, hey, the way I work with my subconscious is to, make sure my ideas and feelings are exhibiting exactly what I want. Oh, okay. So then you almost confuse your mind. So you're not saying, okay, I got to make my mind, I got to fix my, I got to work with my mind. You just get out of your own way and go, okay, let me then work with the subconscious.
So then this is where I go to making it so simple. The conscious mind, he says, you can't bully the subconscious into doing something. What he does say is it's really through persuasion. And what's interesting is that the persuasion comes through feeling. And that's where, it's funny, the secret drives me crazy is because it has to do with feeling as if, and the feeling isn't fooling yourself, it's really getting it into that space. And I think what people would say, and I have said, is when you believe you're lacking something and you say, okay, so now I have to impress upon my subconscious the feeling that I have it. That's challenging. People feel like, how do you do that? How can you really do it? And that's when I realized the beautiful thing that we were given, which was imagination.
Right.
And it's so funny because, again, I'm going to simple. I think, people say go back to being a child. Childhood, we lived in imagination. We played make-believe. We did all these games. Cops and robbers. We made believe we were the cop. We made believe we were the robber. We didn't know what it felt like to be a real cop or a real robber or any make-believe, a mother or whatever it is that the grocery store. Remember playing the grocery store and you're the cashier? But we made believe and we imagined what it felt like to do that, and we had fun with it. And so then you get older and everyone tells you, this is real life and make-believe doesn't exist, and that's, all childhood, blah, blah, blah. And I go back to, once again, childhood, and that was not a mistake to give us imagination. That is what we employ to do exactly what he is saying. If you want to imagine that you have a beautiful car that isn't sitting in your driveway, how do you imagine it's there? Well, you use your imagination. And it was a tool we were given that, again, I a lot of the stuff I look at, I think, wow, we all have this, and yet we put it in the back, the back of the closet, is to go to the Goodwill to give away because we're not supposed to use it. Now we're adults. And that was so powerful.
And isn't it funny that we all started out with it?
That's what I'm saying. We were given it.
It was a given, right?
And we
it was
just
a given.
and we
it was
assumed,
a natural part of us. So,
exactly,
right.
and we assumed that it was, it was given, but it was useless. It was something that we didn't really need. It was just, we had it, and it was like,
that
no,
an assumption based on other people saying stuff to us, like, stop it, that's not real, stop it. Why?
And that's what I'm saying, that it was given to us, and I can employ it. We can all use it,
right?
And that's exactly. It's almost like a tool that, you were given and you thought, oh, we don't need this, put it back, go out there now, you got to get a job, you got to go to college, you got to get it, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, it was the most precious tool we were given. And we all need to go back into our old toy box and pull it out. And right. It's not, and I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, that I happened to just watch the documentary on Won't You Be My Neighbor on Fred Rogers, and it brought me back to my childhood because I loved Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, me too.
And it was, and anybody out there who hasn't seen it, and when I have you over, it is just a wonderful documentary, and that led to this. At a certain point you thought and believed, and then you got older, and then you were the adult, and you were not supposed to do it, when in fact we should go back to a lot of the things that we did as children.
Actually, I think you're right, and I think we would be surprised that there's probably some little minute things that we still do that, yet we don't label it as that.
Maybe.
So it's still there. It's still there as a skill. And, he says Neville Goddard says a lot of really cool stuff in here. And, actualizing to yourself that feeling is the one and only medium through which ideas get to the subconscious, I think is hugely powerful, because we feel so much every day. And yet, he also reminds us, and we were talking about this at another time, that you don't want to entertain an undesirable feeling. You don't want to dwell on, quote unquote, imperfection of others, because that doesn't work. That's not a cool vibration to create.
Well, that's where I go to do unto others as you'd have done to you. And it's so that's where I go. I was reading that, I'm like, oh, well, that has a whole new meaning. And
right.
If you do dwell on, well, so-and-so is this or so-and-so is that, what he says is the subconscious doesn't distinguish between so-and-so thinks this and so-and-so's doing this. The subconscious says, oh, jealousy, or, this one's mean, or this one's ugly, or this one is whatever you want to say. It just hears it. And I know people that have said things about other people, someone on the street, that I see it's a complete reflection of themselves. And I've said in the past to myself, like, someone would say about somebody else, whether, I don't want to go into it, but if they comment on the way they look, and the comment is negative, it's like, oh my God, it's exactly their issue about themselves.
Right.
And things I would never think of saying.
And the cool thing he says, which in this word itself, is that when you do that and that occurs, you just impress your subconscious with limitations. And I think that's amazing, because just the energy of that, I mean, we say that there's possibility, amazing possibility out there, yet the energy of limitations comes from ourselves, judging others. It makes perfect sense. And yet, when we say, oh, we're trying to kind of move through some feelings or whatever, sometimes, you get bogged down in stuff, and you get bogged down in doubt. And, the curiosity of it is, the doubt could be formulated by your, interpretation that you kind of exhibit based in, your judgment of others. And if that expresses limitations, and it's funny because what you said about
doing to others as you had done
to yourself, right? And, when you're talking about that, and there's such a strong energy to that, to the sense where it's almost like seeing everybody as one.
Well, I heard not so long ago an interview, and I think it was with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was on probably like Instagram or something. Like, I don't look these things up. It's whatever kind of comes to me. And he's like, doubt has, destroyed more people's dreams than failure. And and there's something to that, and if we're creating that, I think most people would agree with the statement that doubt comes in your mind. When he says you think something different, you press upon it something different, you don't entertain negative thoughts. Sometimes those negative thoughts just come in your head, and the only way I think about it is that it's like when I talked about meditation, sometimes thoughts come in your head. Sometimes you just gotta let them come in and let them go. Like, you just don't hold on to them, because they're gonna. We live in a world where you hear something, you think something, and you have that momentary lapse of, oh my God, what if? And that comes in your head. And I think if we try to eliminate that completely, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Yet, if we allow it to just come in and then pass, and then go back to, well, wait a minute, I know the truth about this. Sometimes I think we're really hard on ourselves, and I think reading this, I can interpret it as being really hard on myself, because, I'm going to sit there and say, oh my God, I thought this, and, well, why did I let that go in my head? And by doing that, you're ruminating, and therefore that negative thought stays in your subconscious longer. Right. Versus like it comes in and you're like, whoa, okay, and let it leave. And sometimes, as I read this, because I, of course, make everything personal, I always take this, and, when we do these podcasts, I go to personal, because that's how I learn, and that's how I get myself better. And, well, quite frankly, that's why I'm doing these podcasts. And I think a lot of people have the same, you and I are like everybody else, Julie, and I think that everybody has these same issues, at least people that I talk to. And yet I find that the answer to a lot of this is really, when we ask someone, is the cup half full, is it half empty? It's how you look at things. You and I were out the other day, and you said to me, how would you act if timing was always perfect? And I'm like, if I can embrace that, because that was a beautiful thing to say, and an amazing persuasion giving thing to say. It was, because most people don't say those things, and you always tend to find something positive and lighten the mood. And I thought about that, and I'm like, really, that's what it is my perception. Is everything bad, or is really everything okay? And I think that sometimes when I can't get to, the beautiful car sitting in my driveway, example, well, maybe I can get to the perfect car for me is already here, and it's what I want is here, and it's only getting better.
Right.
And there's a reason that this is here the way it is, not because I don't deserve or don't deserve, because it's helping me. I don't know, maybe it's a stick shift you want, and I'm going to learn how to use a stick shift better, so then when that beautiful car that I do want comes, I'm going to be able to ride it like a dream.
Right. There's a real relaxation. There's a real beauty of relaxing into that. And it's a real art, and that doesn't mean that it's impossible for people to do. It's just a real beauty.
I can't sing, but if I choose that I want to sing, I'll take lessons and I'll learn and I'll work at it. You want to hear me? No.
Well, relaxing into that, there's something to that, because even when you were talking about looking at others and making comments and having that affect ourselves, there's a Kabbalion nature in that too, because if we go to the whole positivity of it, and we go to the whole other side of the pendulum, you can change that. And I think there's a real beauty to kind of relaxing into when you mentioned the perfect timing. I remember in the morning getting ready and being like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make it there? When I would get in the way, and instead I would say, okay, it takes 2 minutes to brush my teeth, it takes 2 minutes to, all right, 2 minutes, when I could consider it differently. And I could kind of think about it and feel about it differently. It was relaxing into the sensation that why wouldn't it be perfect timing? Exactly what you said. Why wouldn't it be okay? And not dwelling, because when you're dwelling in that feeling, you're not moving into creation with it.
Do you think that is the biggest why we think it's so difficult? and we bring so much doubt is because, you fall, I'm going to use a common term, we kind of fall off the wagon. You get an idea and it comes in and you think, it got the better of me, and then we stay in it and we get mad at ourselves so that whatever it was that we didn't do the way we wanted to do it kind of stays in our subconscious longer. I'll give you an example, like with dieting. I was never a huge dieter because, as you know, I like to eat or whatever. But I remember if I was trying to cut back or watch what I eat, if I had a day where I screwed up and I ate, instead of trying to beat myself up on it, I'd say, all right, today I didn't, tomorrow's a new day, tomorrow I do it. Instead of kind of focusing on, I didn't do it, I can't do this, I'm eating crap, blah, blah, blah,
right.
And sitting in that yuckiness of it, I would try to say, all right, tomorrow's a new day. And I'm not saying, wow, I did it great or anything, but what I'm thinking is that I think a lot of us dwell in the fact that we failed and we sit in failure.
Right. Well, I think there's a real externalness.
Which perpetuates.
I think, right. And I think there's a real externalness to how we all live. And so my example with, even in the morning getting ready, you look at the clock, you're watching the clock, oh my God, look at this, oh my God, I just lost 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're being controlled, for lack of a better word, by an outside external element, the clock, instead of when you relax into the sensation of, I'm going to have enough time. We've all heard of people that they can't imagine how they got somewhere in a short amount of time, or how they made it to the airport in time, or how they, and there's just relaxing into that feeling. And I think it's interesting what you said about dieting, because he says in here, and we do have that part in our book where he talks about where he kind of traveled in time and for, people's quote-unquote dis-ease. And he says to feel intensely about a wrong without voicing or expressing that feeling is the beginning of dis-ease in both body and environment. Do not entertain the feeling of regret or failure, for frustration or detachment from your objective results in disease. And as you were talking about that, it's like, okay, so what are you focusing on and what are you creating as limitations in the subconscious? In that sense, what are you dwelling on, and where is that doubt kind of ruminating? And you're right, you end up sitting in failure, that's not the best place to be.
Well, but that's where it stays even longer in your subconscious, because you're consciously sitting in failure. Therefore, the subconscious is getting hit more and more and more by that feeling of failure, as opposed to, and I think a lot of us tend to do that, as opposed to saying, darn, I screwed that up. I mean, we all do it, not just about, what I just mentioned. I just gave a stupid example, but whatever it is, and the truth is that we can only get closer to where we want to go by making decisions, and not all decisions are going to work. And that's not because we're failures, it's because that's part of the growth. That's part of the experience that propels us forward. So we can go to the point where either we don't do anything, and we just kind of paralyzed by fear, or we sit and we try something and it doesn't work, and instead of saying, all right, I'm going to try it this way, all right, I'm going to try it that way, we sit and we failed, oh my God, I can't do it, I suck, blah blah blah. And that's what the subconscious hears, and I think that's what he's saying in this. And what's interesting is in this book he talks about the two times when we have our subconscious is in its most attention to us, giving us its most attention is through prayer and through sleep. Right. And you think of the energy of those two times. I mean, to me, when I read it and I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, that moment just before you go to sleep, and when you meditate, your 5 senses kind of go to sleep. And it's interesting because then the subconscious does come forward. Right.
And so another thing he says is that the subconscious always accepts as true that which you feel to be true. And I think that's huge. That's a huge, powerful statement. So irregardless of anything that's going on, if you convince yourself you're fat, you're fat. I mean, it's going to say, oh, okay, sure, no problem.
Well, it goes to, again, what's fat? It's interesting. I had a conversation today with someone, and I says, you reach a certain, so they were talking about gaining weight and, losing weight. This person just had a baby, and it's like, at the end of the day, I can look at myself and I can compare myself to 20 years ago or whatever, and I thought, I'm healthy, I do a lot of things, I'm able to, and it's like, so what's the definition of fat? Everyone has a definition. I'm trying to think of, I can't remember the actress. She was beautiful, Marilyn Monroe. She was not skinny. And yet, you know, I guess there was someone who said, yeah, her thighs rubbed together. She was beautiful. Do you think she considered herself fat? Many people today would consider, if they had that, you know, they would consider themselves. So it really is what you tell yourself. And that's what I was talking about, is your perception. Am I fat or am I healthy? What's important?
Right, and that's simply whatever you impress upon the subconscious, it's going to express.
And so and it's going to be what you see, how you see yourself. I mean, we keep going to the same example, but there are people that are anorexic, that look and see themselves as fat, and we can't understand that. That's another example. And if you see yourself a certain way, until you change the way you see yourself, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what occurs. You're still going to see yourself that way, whatever it is. And I'm not going to go into a list of, you know, adjectives. You have your own, how you see yourself. I have my own, how I view myself. And it's not going to change until I change it. And I think that's the other part of this, is that we all have the power to change how we see ourselves.
Right. And in this example where he's talking about feeling being the secret, that's the superpower, and changing the feeling changes the pattern.
Only you can change the feeling,
right? Because
you said things to me, Julie, and we're not going to, you know, like, oh my God, I've had people say things to me, how can you not see this? How can you not, whatever it is? And until I see it, it doesn't matter what someone tells me, you know, good things or bad. You know, until you can change your mindset to seeing it for yourself. And that's why certain people say, oh, I want to be this. Can you see yourself?
Right.
Well, no, I can't ever see it. Well, it's never going to happen.
Right.
You know, and I'll go to another example. Someone who I want to be rich. You know what? What's the definition of rich? There's always going to be somebody richer than you. But unless you see yourself as rich, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You're never going to consider yourself rich.
Right. And this whole piece is really an exemplification of as within, so without.
And I just think, again, we talk about prayer, we talk about sleep. It's when your five senses are not dictating to you what you see, what you hear, what you feel, what you taste, what you see. It's blocking out all of that.
Right.
And therefore, it's interesting because that's when you have the ability to tell your subconscious anything you want. So why wouldn't you tell it what you really want to say?
Thank you for listening to this production from EI Alliance. Check out our Amazon authors pages for books and podcasts. Find New Threads music and their latest album on iTunes, Spotify, and newthreads.us.